All right, welcome back. In the previous episode, we did learn at several agents, or we looked at several agents Satan has used to hinder the work of Christ from the very time when Christ ascended into the heavens until this moment. And we noticed that immediately Christ ascended into heaven, Satan started persecuting the church through Jewish authorities. And we looked at some examples as well. But then, as the gospel spread through beyond Judea, Satan employed his agents of the pagan Roman Empire who had not known God, the God of heaven, but as many of them were attracted to this idea of God, the God of heaven, the pagan authorities and the people themselves saw it fit to persecute the Christians in that sense because they were kind of taking up subjects from their idolatry and paganism into Christianity. But in all these situations, Satan was studying the effectiveness and making analysis of whether he was making progress and succeeding in this conflict. But he realized that he was actually not making progress. So he decided to reduce on persecution because, as we noted, that the more Christians were being persecuted, the more Christians joined the faith. And so Satan understood this and he changed his tactics. And once he changed tactics, he instead infiltrated, or rather, not actual infiltration as such, but what he did is that he exalted the Christian church back then, and the church became from around early fourth century. The church became acceptable in the state, and it became Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. And now that would sound a good thing. However, it brought its negative things, and part of the reasons why it is actually extremely negative is the fact that the state recognizing the church and pushing its agendas become it's a concept that is completely unbiblical and non-supported by Christ and heaven, and that is the church and state affairs coming together such that they act as one. In the end of it all, what we see is the church becomes a stronger influencer of the state, and the state makes laws that actually push the agendas of the church when the church is influencing the state. And that is exactly what happened. They accepted and they recognized Christian organization or Christian church back then, which became apostate, influenced the state to persecute the small numbers of minority Christians who stuck to the old truths that were delivered to them. And so that is what we saw. Now, in this episode, what we want to delve into briefly are the tools Satan uses. And I want to make this remark and this comment, just as if you've noted all through the episodes, is that these are actually very brief uh, talks on some of these concepts. We do not go into the details for the reason of time and other things, but with time, as God blesses, we shall go into the details, and we shall see all these things. However, what we note here is Satan employs several tools. And in the previous episode, we focused more on the agents he employed. Of course, we did talk about the tools briefly, for instance, persecution. So right now we want to look at the idea or the concept of persecution briefly still. And if we go to Revelation chapter 12, and let me flip there, Revelation 12 and verse 13. Verse 13, it says, "And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child." Now, we noted that this casting unto the earth is actually talking about the second casting, the result of his conflict with Christ, in which Christ overcomes him on the cross. And that is the casting into the earth means that he has lost his representation of earth, and earth has gone back to the hands of Christ. And essentially he can no longer, he has nowhere else to go. He can no longer go, he cannot attempt to go to the unfallen worlds because they already rejected him. The unfallen angels he no longer has access to them. And so right now is in the earth and nowhere else to go. So he has to put all his efforts on here on the earth. And so what he starts with is persecuting the woman which brought forth the man-child. We saw that the woman means the church. And we also saw that the church is what brought forth Christ. We made a note that it's actually, of course, in a literal sense, Christ was born through the Virgin Mary. However, it's not that the woman here being talked about is the Virgin Mary, because we do not see such emphasis of persecution on Mary herself, who later gave birth to several other children. We do not see her being persecuted by the dragon. We don't see that. So that is, however, we see Satan persecuting the church. And we also noted several scriptures that indicated that actually the church is represented as a woman in the sight of God. So that was just a brief of what the woman indicates. However, when we flip to verse 17 of Revelation 12, it says, "The dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." Now, what we noted in verse 13 is that the dragon persecutes the woman. However, the dragon does not stop there. The woman has a seed whom we understood as Christ, isn't it? And the seed has a remnant. So there are those who are going to come out of Christ, or there are those who are going to believe on Christ, and those are called the remnant of Christ. And the remnant of Christ are those who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So these two characteristics are extremely important today in identifying the true remnant of Christ. They keep the commandments of God. They do not particularly say that the commandments of God are no longer valid or they were nailed on the cross. That is an extremely unbiblical concept, and it's part of what the devil is trying to do, as we are going to see on the next slide, in the idea of deception. And so essentially what we see is that the dragon goes out to persecute the woman. That is in verse 13. When he fails on the woman, he continues also to persecute the remnant of her seed. And we noted that her seed, the seed of the woman, is Christ. And so the dragon persecutes the remnant of Christ. essentially, and those are they that keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. These concepts can be explored further in details to understand the testimony of Jesus Christ, to understand the commandments of God. However, what we note is that the commandments of God in this conflict are extremely relevant. Extremely relevant. So that is persecution. And we noted from the previous episode that when the devil started and saw that actually persecution was not working for him, so he brought in an exaltation of the state, of the church in the sight of the state. Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. However, as true Christians separated themselves from the false apostate statewide recognized church, they were persecuted, that we talked about. Now, the devil is going to try to target those because the churches, the officially recognized state church is already apostate, so that's already on the side of the devil. So what the devil needs to do is to reach out and find ways of leading those who have the small remnant, leading the small remnant to apostasy and compromise. So what he does are some of these things. He sends unto them false prophets, sends unto others, or others claim to be false, to be Christs, and then other men. We are going to explore these concepts and in some bit. Let's read these texts and we see what exactly is talked about there. So the first text is Matthew chapter 7 verse 15. Matthew 7, this is Matthew 7 and verse 15. Here it says, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." Now, that is extremely important. So what is happening here? They are, one, prophets. Prophets meaning that they are Christianized in a sense. However, they are false prophets, and these come to you. Who? They come to this small group of people who are actually already seen as antagonistic to the statewide church, and so they already seen in that negative aspect. But now, the devil is trying to infiltrate them with people who claim to be Christians, but no longer claiming, not only claiming to be Christians, but yet they have this higher level of service. They take upon themselves the concept of being prophets, and they come to the church, the true church, the true small church, in sheep's clothing. Sheep's clothing simply indicating that they come as Christians, yet inwardly their intent is not to bring or to maintain the image of God in this true church, but rather to lead it to apostasy. They are ravening wolves. Now that is interesting, and we can explore that possibly more in chapter chapter 24, and we can read verse 11 and verse 24 as well. Verse 11 says, "And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many." So Christ well understood that there will be many false prophets, especially nowadays, and they shall deceive many. They shall deceive many. And that is interesting that many will be deceived. That's for a fact. Uh, if we go to verse 24, it says, this is verse 24. Yeah. Okay, it says, for there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, in so much that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Now, if you look at this particular verse, Christ is simply adding more emphasis to what he has already spoken. But he says not only false prophets, but false Christs. We are going to explore, and we are going to read another text from Mark on that. However, there is an element of also showing great signs and wonders. In other words, performing miracles. And because of this, because of what they teach, and also because of the miracles they perform, their deceptions would be extremely, extremely deceiving, I should say, extremely hard to detect. That if it were possible, thank God it is not possible. Thank God it is just not possible to deceive the very elect. But the idea is that these deceptions would be extremely subtle, that they would deceive so many people. And so, continuing with the idea of false Christ, if we look at Mark chapter 13, Mark chapter 13, verse 6, Mark 13, verse 6, and actually, let's read from verse 5. It says, and Jesus answering them began to say, take heed lest any man deceive you. We need to be careful. We need to be alert. We need to be sober, such that we are not deceived. Then he says, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. So what will these people be doing in these last days? They will come and say, I am the Christ, or Christ has, incarnated in me. Many people have said that. And these shall do that. And if it were possible, they would deceive the very elect, and they would deceive so many people. But Christ is telling us we need to be careful that no man should deceive us. And when you read the following verses, he talks about several things, and also how his coming will be like, such that we are not deceived. In Luke chapter 21, and that is the verse 8, it says, it's still similar thing, still the same thing. It says, take heed that ye be not deceived, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draweth near, go ye not therefore after them. So Christ is telling us, do not just follow everyone because they are possibly Christian, or possibly they have miracles they are performing, or what. No, don't just be deceived like that. Study your Bibles, know the times, know what Christ wants us to be knowledgeable of in these last days, and please take care that no one deceives you. So, besides using the false prophets and the false Christs, Satan also uses other men to infiltrate or to deceive, to bring about deception. Let's explore a text from 2 Peter chapter 2, and that is the first verse. Chapter 2, verse 1 says, and Peter just makes an application of what it was in the past and what it should be today. It says, but there were false prophets also among the people, talking about the Jews in the Israelites in the wilderness. Even as there shall be false teachers among you, there shall be, that is future as well, indicating that there will be, or there is now. And he says, who privately shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction. Now, this is extremely interesting, because what these false teachers will do is that they will privately or without the knowledge, or without actually being detected that easily, they'll bring in damnable heresies. They'll bring in concepts that are contrary to the truths of the Bible. They'll bring in concepts that actually deny the Lord Jesus Christ who bought them. They will start teaching, or they will teach people in the church, in the true church of God, concepts that take them away from the principles of God. The idea of coming in privately, infiltrating, is actually a concept that we need to think about, because there are organizations that were put there to infiltrate the Protestant churches, to such that they can beat down Protestantism, which they have effectively done at this point, that many of the Protestant denominations no longer take themselves as Protestant. Why? Because they have been deeply infiltrated and deeply taken over. In Acts chapter 20, verse 29, it sounds to be a similar concept, of the church, or the people being infiltrated into. It says, let me just highlight it for visibility. It says, for I know this, that after my departing, that is Paul speaking, shall grievous wolves, ravening wolves, enter in among you, not sparing the flock. So Paul is basically talking about the same concept of infiltration. So besides persecution, and now deception through false prophets and false Christs, now there is infiltration. People who put on sheep's clothing, and they infiltrate the church, and they start bringing in these damnable heresies. Now, some of the strategies the devil uses, of course, in our time, since the so-called age of reason, has been rationalism and reason. The fact that people have promoted the idea that there is relativism when it comes to truth, and truth is no longer absolute. Now the very common ongoing concept is the idea that a person's gender is not biological in its sense, but anyone can choose what they feel like. So all these things, Satan brings them to table, such that he causes confusion among people, and people go away with diverse opinions, and they are extremely confused. Yet they think themselves wise. You should read Romans chapter 1 on that. as people are extremely confused, yet they think themselves wise. And the other idea is false science, which we definitely know that false science is contrary to the biblical truth and the concepts of true science. False science has so many things, but part of it is the idea of evolution and the Big Bang. The other so-called crafted uh, fantasies of how we came into existence. Satan is using all these tools to see that he causes a lot of confusion amongst so many people, and such that he leads many to destruction. Now, let's look at who is Satan's major target. Who is Satan's major target? When you read 2 Corinthians 4, uh, 4, 4, 2 Corinthians 4, 4, you note something interesting. It says, in whom, in whom, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. Now, this is the concept I want you to focus on, the idea that Satan is a god of this world, and also the idea that he blinds the minds of those which believe not. So the people who believe not are blinded by the devil such that they do not see the gospel truth. Are we together? But those are already his. He can do anything with them because he's called the God of this world. We noted that that phrase is simply because the world is still under the influence of sin, and Satan has the majority of people on his side on this world, and so those majority he blinds such that they don't see. However, when it comes to the church, as we've read in Revelation 12:17, he persecutes the church. His target is there. His target is there. When you go to Revelation 12:17, which we've seen already, is that he persecutes the remnant of the woman's seed that keep the commandments of God and the testimony of the faith of Jesus Christ. Now, in Revelation 12:17, there is a comparison or a similarity with the language that is used in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. And I want to flip there. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. It says, "And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." Now, this is a promise the gospel first preached to the fallen pair in Eden, where God says that he will put enmity between the dragon, the devil, and the church. The woman there representing the church, not Eve in the sense. Why? Because we do not see the conflict between Satan and Eve end when Eve dies. No. We see this conflict rage up until now. And between thy seed, well, that is Satan's seed, and the woman's seed, whom we've seen in Revelation chapter 12 as Christ. And the seed of the devil shall bruise the seed of the devil shall be bruised by its head, and yet the seed or the devil shall be bruised by his head, and he shall bruise the seed of the woman by his heel, which talks about what Christ would suffer on the cross. But what is important is the fact that the language there is similar. the conflict between the enmity put between the devil and Christ. Basically, that conflict is won by Christ on the cross, and that conflict extends to the remnant of Christ's seed. And that is what we saw, that even in the concept of, in the idea that Satan attacks the seed of Christ, the church, they still overcome him by the blood of the Lamb, by that which was shed on the cross. And let's just reread this verse because it is important. We've seen it in the previous episodes and we can still look at it here. Revelation chapter 12 verse 11 says, "And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death." So the people who are going to stand for the truth will give up their lives. It will be like Christ and will be ready to die for the truth. And so in this conflict, the final result of everything here is actually the third casting. It is the third casting, because in each conflict there is a casting that happens, a casting of the devil. If we recall, Isaiah chapter 14 verse 15 says, "Yet thou, who is Lucifer, shall be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit." So Isaiah 14 verse 12 to 15 gives a summary, a very brilliant summary, from the very time this conflict began to the very time this conflict ends. And Satan will be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Now that concept is explored more in Revelation chapter 20, and possibly we can read that. We can read verse 1 to 3 before we read other verses. Revelation chapter 20 verse 1, it says, "And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season." So this happens when Christ comes back the second time, and as the world is completely demolished, it becomes uninhabitable. The people of Christ are taken up to meet Christ in the air, and the world is completely void, the way it was in the before God made it habitable in Genesis. That same state is the world is taken back to a similar state, and in that state Satan is cast, or is imprisoned on this earth, uninhabited, in a sense that he will have no work to do, he will have no one to deceive. And you can explore Jeremiah chapter 4 verse 23, when Jeremiah is talking about the second coming. He says, "I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light." So this picture of what Jeremiah gives us is actually a similar picture to what we see in Genesis, when God is creating, or making our world, which he creates the earth, then he starts making it habitable. But the moment he creates the earth, it is in a similar state which Jeremiah talks about here. It was without form, it was void, and it had no light. That is what we see in Genesis chapter 1. Now, when Christ comes back the second time, a similar state will be our world will be taken back to that similar state, and that is where the devil is cast into. And Revelation chapter 20 verse 3 calls it the bottomless pit, which we understand from Jeremiah chapter 4 verse 23 that it is this world uninhabitable. And that is the third casting, which happens during or immediately at the second coming. And Lucifer, in that sense, or in that prison of his, what is he doing? He waits for the third coming of Christ to be totally and completely destroyed in the lake of fire with all those who have rejected the gospel of Christ. Let's read that text from Revelation chapter 20 verse 10. We are almost closing this, and this is the last part of our series. And so here it says, and the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. So we see the beast and the false prophet who are already there, and the devil will be also cast into the same lake of fire and brimstone, and which shall torment them and completely wipe them from the face of existence. And that is what will be the last act in destroying evil that God will do, and that is in that literally will mark the end of the great controversy. However, what is important in all this is the fact that, as stated in Romans chapter 8, verse 37, nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Christ that loved us. It is important to remember that through Christ we can win this conflict. And it is also important to remember that our enemy is already conquered. We only have to cling with Christ. I want to leave you with these words, and I pray that God blesses you and God guides you through this great controversy, that everything you do, you may lean upon Christ, you may cling and cleave to Him, that nothing should separate you from the love of God. May God bless you, and I wish you the best until we shall meet again, by the grace of God and by the will of God. Amen.